The Russians historically, in the last couple of decades, and then increasingly, are launching cyber attacks, and they are stealing vast amounts of information. The Russians, in my opinion, and based on the intel and counter-intel people I've talked to, could not have known how best to weaponize that information unless they had been guided. And here's
guided by Americans.
Guided by Americans. We went and told everybody we could find in the middle of the summer the Russians were messing with the election, and we were basically shooed away. Remember, Comey was more than happy to talk about my emails, but he wouldn't talk about investigation of the Russians. So people went to vote on November 8th having no idea that there was an active counterintelligence investigation going on of the Trump campaign. I set up my campaign, and we have our own data operation. I get the nomination, so I'm now the nominee of the Democratic Party. I inherit nothing from the Democratic Party.
What do you mean nothing?
I mean, it was bankrupt. It was on the verge of insolvency. Its data was mediocre to poor, non-existent, wrong.
Whoa. Joining us now is the chair of the Democratic Caucus, Congressman Joe Crowley. Congressman, we've heard Hillary Clinton blame Comey. There's Russia, there's WikiLeaks. There's lots of reasons as to why things went wrong and where she feels they went wrong especially. We haven't heard her talk about the DNC. What do you make of that?
Well, I think there were a lot of things that contributed to the loss, and I think she would even suggest that maybe her performance wasn't the best.
Right, no.
But having said that, and she's a very dear friend of mine, and I admire her greatly, I do think there were a number of things that went on in the national election. I think we'll be analyzing this for maybe years to come. I think books have yet to be written about what happened during all this time. I do think there was a strong influence of Russia in this election. All the top intelligence agencies have said that. The only person who keeps denying it or not acknowledging it is the president. And as long as that continues to happen,
what about her
I think we'll hear more about
analysis of the
this.
DNC?
Well,
because I guess some might argue that the DNC rigged it against Bernie Sanders. I mean, there's lots of narratives out there. Yeah. What do you know? And
politics is a tough
her?
business. I've been in it for a good bit myself. I understand how difficult it can be. If it was bankrupt then, I don't know what state it's in now. We're in a rebuilding mode, obviously, after that loss. And I think the focus really now for the DNC has to be not about what happened in the last election, but about the national election now. And that's individual congressional districts. It's hand-to-hand combat. And it's not a national election. It's all politics. It's local. And that's where we're going to be successful in these districts is, putting aside all the Russia issues, that's a Washington issue. What we've been focusing on and telling our folks in Kansas to do is focus on your local issues and leave the Washington stuff to Washington.
Although Secretary Clinton didn't mention him by name, she implied in some of her comments yesterday, which was an extraordinary performance of her breaking down why she may have lost and what she's going to be doing going forward, suggests that perhaps that President Obama and the White House didn't do enough in terms of campaigning and getting the vote out for her. Do you think he bears some responsibility for her loss?
Well, I saw the president in that last month or so ferociously trying to push back against what they were fearing could ultimately happen, and in fact did happen. Again, I think if we're going to continue to look back on what was or could have been or what didn't happen, look, it took a long. I'm still not over the results of the election. I think many Americans, particularly Democrats, are not fully there yet. But I do think if we get bogged down in this, it's going to make our work even more difficult in unifying the party and moving forward, and that's what I'm about.
Well, I understand that, but then I think the question for both Joes might be, and I'll turn to Joe Scarborough, is then how does Hillary Clinton perhaps lead the way? Because we're only asking these questions right now because she raised it. Right. We're very clear on. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, she keeps bringing it up. And, this is a woman that's contributed a great deal to our country over the past 4 decades. She has so much to be proud of as her role not only in the White House, but also as U.S. Senator. Joe can talk about what a great job she did for the people of New York. Republicans
First Lady.
That worked with her said she was one of the hardest workers and had great admiration for her. Generals that worked with her had great admiration for her. Wherever you went in Washington, people who worked with her had great admiration for her. But Joe, she keeps going out and she keeps blaming this on Comey, Russia, misogyny, now the DNC. And my God, if you're a Democrat, 2018 is really, it is one of the most critical midterm elections probably in the past 40 or 50 years. Shouldn't all Democrats forget about, well, learn from 2016, but use those sort of forums to talk about how Democratic candidates are helped to stop what Donald Trump's doing in Washington.
I couldn't agree with you more, Joe. In fact, that's what I said. I think that what we have to do, and I said books will be written about this in years to come, and I look forward to reading many of them, if not all of them. But what we have to learn is how we win in 2018. And I think it's critical in order to bring balance back to Washington that Democrats are successful in 2018. And it's not going to be a national election. It's going to be, part of this is a referendum on the president. Part of this is a referendum on the inability of the Republicans in the House to get things done. But it's also about local politics. And all, you know, the old Tip O'Neill, all politics is local. And I think the Russia issue is an important issue for the American people. They are focused on it. But they're more concerned about the economy. They're concerned about putting food on the table, whether they can afford college. When they graduate college, can they pay the student loan? Can they have a job? And most importantly, I think, Joe, when you have a job, is it near where you grew up? Are your parents able to connect with their grandchildren? That's real happiness. And I don't think we focused enough on those issues. And that's what we have to get back to.
I should add here that in terms of Hillary going after the DNC, the guy who ran the DNC data operation has taken strong exception to what she said yesterday. And he said, he was on Twitter last night saying that his operation was trying to warn the Clinton campaign they were missing the signs in Wisconsin, Michigan. The Clinton campaign, he says, didn't want to hear that from them. But Congressman, let me just ask you quickly. So Hillary Clinton's made clear, and she can, as far as I'm concerned, she's the candidate. She can process this any way she wants. She's made clear all of the ways she thinks she was sort of victimized during the election. But from a standpoint of a Democrat, looking ahead to 2018 and looking ahead to 2020, if you take all of the things that she's put out there off the table, take WikiLeaks, take Comey, take Russia, take that off the table, what was the biggest failure of the Clinton campaign that your party can learn from?
I think not recognizing that we had to have a presence in states that we took for granted, whether it's Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, real concerns about the future of Pennsylvania, a right to potentially becoming a right-to-work state after this election. I hope that doesn't happen, and it shouldn't have happened in the first place. I think places like West Virginia, and look at the map, and you can see where we once were strong, and we now have little or no presence at all. And I think that's what we need to be focusing on.
Good point. Joe?
Well, and Joe, I also, states that you didn't focus on, and subsets in those states that Barack Obama focused on and that other Democrats have focused on, white working class Americans who have felt ignored and left behind by the Democratic Party. We had Joe Biden, the vice president, warning us at the DNC that white working class Americans were being ignored by the Clinton campaign. We had Ed Rendell at the DNC saying on TV that Pennsylvania is in play and they need to focus more on white working class Americans and not completely ignore them. How important is that? Getting the white working class voters that voted for Barack Obama and then vote for Donald Trump back in the Democratic fold.
I think, Joe, that we as Democrats think of ourselves as the Big Ten party, and we think we're going like this. And in reality, a lot of people around the country think we're just going like this and moving the tent around. One day they're in the tent, the other day they're out. I think we failed not just to white voters. I think we need a message that speaks to all voters. And that's what I'm about working on, an economic message, a jobs message, the need for a real infrastructure bill. That has just been waning in Washington. We begged the president, if there's one thing that we could work on, maybe it's infrastructure. And apparently we had to do health care reform, that debacle. Now maybe tax reform, which is much more difficult. And then maybe we'll get to infrastructure. At some point, there needs to be some effort to try to do something on behalf of the American people. They're suffering. They want jobs. They want long-term jobs, jobs for the future, building not shovel-ready projects, but projects that are long-term, decades-long, that can put kids through school, put kids through college, and bring back that American dream.
All right, Chair of the Democratic Caucus, Congressman Joe Crowley, thank you so much for being on the show this morning.
My condolences to you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.